This chapter is focused on managing the complexity of third-party delivery. Chris Monk, CEO of YourFare, will discuss the importance of maintaining a presence in the third-party marketplaces and how technology can improve operational efficiencies and execution. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for being here today. Hot topic these days, so let's jump right in. So, we heard it a million times, and I think it's been, going back and forth, there's been, concerns in the industry about profitability, about third party. And really, do I need to do delivery? Do I need to be, on all the channels and, very broad topics, but why don't we just start with the question of, do I need to play in this game? And what advice do you give for operators out there when they're trying to make those decisions?
Yeah, I think first off, it doesn't fit everyone, right? Everyone's model doesn't work. I mean, I was talking to a restaurateur yesterday that just decided that he's no longer going to do dine-in. He's no longer going to do third-party delivery, and they're going to turn it into a venue that does COVID, event space, right? Like for small gatherings. So people are trying to figure out what's working for them right now. So, we're seeing more fine dining restaurants getting into third party, which you'd never think you'd order a $40 steak to get delivered to the house. But now with some of the to-go containers and par cooking the food, it's actually traveling pretty well. So you are seeing a mix of restaurants getting into the space. I think one of the things that I always tell restaurateurs is you don't know until you try it. And you're never going to know if Postmates or DoorDash or Grubhub or Uber Eats, which are the 4 large national partners, which one is going to be great in your area, right? Because you have different cuisine. You can talk to a different restaurateur. They're going to tell you that DoorDash is great in this area, but it might be Uber Eats for you guys, right? So I think signing up for all of them and then understanding what your strategy is moving forward. And what I always tell restaurateurs is come up with a strategy, not for tomorrow, but for the next 5 years. And I know with the times right now with COVID, it's very tough to think long-term because everyone right now is in survival mode, but you got to figure out what your strategy is long-term. And, it's surprising how many restaurants we talk to right now. Half of them aren't using any third party, and we're actually helping them sign up for these third parties. We have direct relationships with all the third-party delivery services. And then the other half are using 4 or 5 services, and it's really more of an operational conversation. But what you need to do as a restaurateur is you really need to come up with a strategy, and it's layering it, right? You need to make sure first you have a website, right? We're having to build websites for restaurants right now, which is still unbelievable. You need to optimize your Google listings. So when someone does find you, that they can click the website link and it takes you to your website, not somebody else's, right? So that you own that customer data. And then you need an online ordering solution for your own customers, for your own website, instead of just sending it to a third party. And there's a lot of on-demand features now too. So you can actually have drivers that will deliver your food, even if they're not in-house delivery drivers. And then you can add third-party delivery to kind of give you that next stage, which is the customer acquisition, which is marketing to customers that maybe downloaded DoorDash in San Francisco, but just moved to Austin, Texas, and they're using it for discovery, right? Some restaurants go in the reverse order, right? They use all the third parties to drive revenue and increase volume, and then they realize that they really want to own the customer experience. So that's kind of the strategy that we're going with right now for most restaurateurs that are calling YourFare.
And it almost seems like today with the third-party delivery providers, and we'll talk about first-party delivery in a minute because I think it's really important, right? And you're starting to see that big shift, and owning that customer data is important. But almost like a table stake of you have to have a presence because people are out there searching. And in some of the other discussions, it's not just about the great experience in the restaurant. It's about kind of digital hospitality. I hear that theme coming along, and so you gotta be where your customers are, and then you have to be able to service them in kind of wherever they want to kind of interact with you and your brand. And so having that presence in the marketplaces is important. But proliferating yourself across those channels then brings a lot of operational complexity that you talked about. And so
Right.
how do you as an operator deal with that? I mean, we've all seen tablet hell, right? We've all lived it. Much easier for the delivery providers to have that kind of closed system. But POS integrations, helps from an operational perspective, but just consolidation because it puts so much stress on the teams in the restaurant today.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this once again comes down to coming up with that strategy, right? this is that 50% of the restaurants that are coming to us because they're trying to solve an operational issue in the restaurant. And then there's the other ones that haven't even felt that pain yet, where we're actually solving the problem for them before they add all the third-party delivery services. So I think, once again, you really have to come up with your operational strategy as well as your online ordering strategy. And it really depends. Do you have a POS system that you can program so that when you get the order through a tablet or fax or email, right? Some of these third-party delivery services still have to call in the orders, right? So how are you coming up with that process? And I think that really tailors the conversation is towards more about volume, right? If this is 3% of your business, it's not going to be a huge concern. But with everything going on with COVID, we're hearing restaurants that 70% of their business is coming from online ordering. And that would make sense with the recent study that Google came out with that's saying restaurant takeout on Google searches increased 285% just last month. So, to see those kind of numbers, it makes sense why they're optimized and they have huge marketing budget. And so they capture the customer. And then it's about convenience, right? That customer is using that third-party delivery service because it's convenient to them. So I think it's important to explain what the current process is. So when a customer places an order with one of these third-party delivery services, they don't know a company like YourFare exists. They're not really familiar with how the operational efficiency of the restaurant is running. But when they place that order, these third-party delivery services have provided the restaurant with a tablet. And so the reason I actually started the company is I was working with a family friend, Dino and Santino's Pizza in San Francisco. And that's the video on our website. That's Dino. That's not scripted. That's Dino being Dino, right? Which I absolutely love. And I hope we keep that for a long time. But, we used 7 different tablets. We had a laptop for emails. We were using, Easy Cater and Zesty and Cater to Me and some of these other catering companies for email. And then we had the fax machine as well. And it was just an operational nightmare. And so the real idea was, how can we streamline all those third-party delivery services? And so once these APIs started coming out, and like you said earlier, opening up those APIs to companies like ourselves, we could start streamlining the process. So you can imagine, you got the phone ringing off the hook, you got a line out the door, the restaurant's packed, and now you have these 5, 6, 7 different tablets in some instances, all ringing, and you have to confirm the order and then input it in the POS system. It's really difficult. And so we did a study with one of our restaurant partners who was doing about 1,500 orders per month. So pretty high volume when it came to third-party delivery. And at 3 minutes per order, they were spending 75 labor hours per month per location. They have 23 locations just on labor to input those orders in the POS system. So now with YourFare, what we can do is we can actually integrate that order with something that's called menu mapping. So when an order is sent through a third-party delivery service like DoorDash, Uber, Grubhub, or Postmates, that order is sent to us in a JSON file. And without going too technical into it, ultimately we get an order. It has an item ID, let's just say for a chicken Caesar salad. But in the POS system, it's not going to have one item ID for a chicken Caesar salad. It's going to have a Caesar salad with a modifier add chicken, modifier dressing choice, and no croutons, so on and so forth, right? So with our technology, we take and we map one ID to multiple IDs in the POS system. And that's really what's going on now with being able to streamline all those third parties into the POS system. And that's really the silver bullet to this entire.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's challenging because having been around the POS world a lot, every POS handles menu items differently as well too. And so, I think when you look at it, hats off, and, having come from a family-owned restaurant, I think that, the common theme is that restaurant people are resilient and they'll find a way to make it work,
Right.
even in the most complex environments. And so, managing those 7 tablets becomes the norm sometimes for people, but, letting them know that there's actually a better way. And, with kind of coming out of COVID, and, you've seen the studies, and, I have as well, we may see a small decrease in some of the online components, but not much, right? I mean, customers have built new habits. And so, having that operational efficiency is going to be, really important from an overall profitability perspective. But I think you bring up an interesting part, because I think the other part that gets kind of overlooked is getting the sales and the POS is super important. So you can, do cash and controls from that standpoint. But really where a lot of the pain and the complexity comes is the menu mapping and the content management piece, right? And
Right.
so you look at, if you have 7 different tablets, 7 different providers, trying to update and keep your menus in sync becomes more, another full-time job in the restaurant as well too. And so, any best practices around kind of how you set up the menus, and then also, leading second question, is any strategies from a profitability perspective? You're hearing trends about higher prices on the delivery channels as opposed to kind of in the restaurant, and kind of what are you seeing with that? And what do you recommend to people getting started in terms of some of those strategies as well?
Yeah, so on the menu side, I think one of the things that's interesting right now is that even if the POS system is a legacy system, or it's something that we don't have an integration with, that's why we provide every restaurant with tablet as well, right? So our tablet comes with unlimited LTE service, right? So even if the Wi-Fi in the restaurant goes down or the POS goes down, you can still get the order, you can still make the food, you can enter it manually, and all that information. But more importantly is we actually have a support function. So when you hit support, you can actually provide feedback to us, and we know exactly which order it is, which third party it's working with, and we can reach out and handle that issue for you. So, the restaurant doesn't have to sit on the phone for 45 minutes on a busy Friday and Saturday night. So when it comes to menu updates, pricing updates, 86ing of items, anything like that, we handle for the restaurant. I think when it comes to menus, the most important part of setting up the menu, these third-party delivery services, if you set up each location individually and you don't have them linked, the item IDs are still going to be different. And therefore, you still have to do the menu mapping process like you started over again, right? Because you're mapping all the IDs again. So we have a lot of restaurants, that when we talk about like the onboarding fee and how long it takes, and they're like, well, it's simple. All the menus are the same. It's like, well, are they?
Yeah.
Like, do you have an enterprise functionality like Toast has, where all the menus are linked and it is the same? Okay, great. You do? Well, when you onboarded with the third parties, did they set you guys up as a master menu so that all of them are updated from one menu, or are they all separate, right? And 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, they're all separate. Like, we're working with a group right now that has over 500 locations, and all the franchisees set them up individually. So we have to go in like it's a mom and pop restaurant, even though they have a huge breadth of restaurants across the country. So I think when it comes to setting up your menu, be specific. You don't have to put everything on the menu just because you have a large menu. Make sure it travels well. Make sure the preparation is there. Make sure you have the right containers and the prep works there. I think you can learn a lot from seeing what restaurants are providing what menu items on these third parties. And, I won't go into ghost kitchens and virtual concepts too much right now, but, there's a huge opportunity that for restaurants that, already have a great product. Like, we have a client in San Francisco that had a Brazilian menu connected to the pizza restaurant, but you wouldn't know that unless you went into the restaurant and saw the Brazilian menu. And so he created a second concept out of the same kitchen, didn't have to add any items, and now he's listed across all those 4 platforms. So I think really understanding what your menu is and how you can be a little bit flexible right now with understanding that you can have multiple brands coming out of the same kitchen is really going to help long-term when you're managing those menus and rolling them out, whether it's POS or you're using a tablet solution with those third-party delivery services.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And we can table ghost kitchens for another day because it's an entire separate topic. But I think it really provides a way from an innovation perspective in adding new, with a low cost infrastructure. Being able to try new menu items, try new brands.
Exactly.
And so I think you're going to continue to see the surgence of this in across big brands and small brands as well too. So excited to see where that's headed. Chris, I think the other thing, again, just kind of coming back to it is a profitability piece and really different ways of kind of maximizing profitability for operators. And we're seeing other tactics, like we talked about with, multiple price points. You talked about maybe limiting some menu items to make sure that you're not, kind of controlling waste, so you don't have, items that won't carry and maybe, cause a lot of customer
Right.
complaints. But, what are some other, what are the recommendations and what are some of the trends that you're seeing from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here, and you touched on it earlier about brand, right? Brand recognition. I think that the way that restaurants are marketing themselves, right? It's changed in a big way. Social media is one thing. I was watching, or I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about some of these large brands who have, millions of followers, or hundreds of thousands of followers, right? And they post something and they get 47 likes, right? And the question really becomes is why is that happening? And it's because it's not really content that's engaging, right? And so if you're going to come up with a marketing strategy, I think trying to figure out ways to engage with the customer and get your brand in front of them, right? Which third-party delivery is a great way to do it. So if you look at it without understanding that this is a marketing tool, you're going to think that these commissions are high. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we've done the numbers. The average restaurant, if you're doing in-house delivery, depending on how it's set up and what state you're in, right, with minimum wage and things like that, it's about 18 to 20%, right? So if you take that and you think about the marketing, if it's around 20, 25%, it's very doable, right? You just have to get really understanding about what your food costs are, how you're managing your business, and really drive it through volume, right? Like you got to be at high capacity as far as the operation's concerned. So I think that, most restaurants are adding, let's say 5 to 10%. I think that is, that's palatable. I do know a large restaurant brand that tried to do all 30%, and the order volume just, went down because if you're ordering a pizza or a burger or something like that, and now it's $46 for a pizza or, $22 for a burger, they're going to notice it. They're going to click on the next restaurant. They're going to order from them, right? And especially as this goes on and people get a little bit more price sensitive. So I think, 5 to 10% increase is fine. Now, you need to do that across all the third parties because that's what the third parties want is they want consistency of the menus. But on your own website, I would be offering the normal pricing, right? It's your own website. It's your own online ordering. Most restaurants are just doing pickup for that, which then incentivizes the customer to come in and pick up so you have that relationship with them. But I think that's doable. But it's really about understanding the menu, once again, optimizing the pricing so that it's something that you're actually making money from. But you also have to remember that this is a marketing cost. Like people aren't getting radio ads and magazine ads, newspaper ads, or doing direct mail. Which, by the way, I still think direct mail is a phenomenal opportunity. And I still think it's super underutilized in the restaurant space, especially if you have your own online ordering and you can just tell them to order direct. I think it's a great tool. But there are costs to acquire customers. And so when you put that in there with the fact that they're doing the delivery and you can offset it with like a 5 to 10% fee, once again, depending on the food and the food costs and what type of cuisine it is, there's definitely huge opportunities to be very profitable, especially if you can parlay that into your own online ordering strategy as well.
I mean, I think it's interesting because it kind of follows kind of the airlines and the hotels from, 15, 20, what however long ago when, online kind of bookings came on to play. And you always had the kind of the best rate guarantee on the booking direct with a hotel. And I think first party is kind of following in those footsteps. And so maybe again, let's talk about a good segue into first party. Like, what does that mean? And, for me, the most impactful part is then owning the customer and then being able to market to them. But, what are the trends that you're seeing in first party and, outside of owning the customer, again, a big part of it, why are people moving into that channel?
Yeah, I think, I love looking at restaurant technology, right? Like it's all I've ever known. Graduating from college, working with Ovations and Comcast Spectacor, running a casino and rolling out Don Shula's Steakhouse and Ling & Louis Asian Fusion, and then working for Titan Brands with my co-founder, Scott Frost, and opening multiple Husong's Cantinas and a Slice of Vegas. So really having that operational background, right? And then working for companies like Mogul, doing restaurant loyalty, Living Social, doing daily deals. So I've always been in the restaurant space, mainly in the technology side of things. So
it gets in your blood and it's hard to get out of it.
yeah, it definitely does. So I think there's a huge opportunity for what we're doing when it comes to first party ordering. We actually recently acquired a company back in January. We're actually just about to do an announcement of it, so I can start talking about it. But we acquired a company called Pronto, which does direct online ordering through the restaurant's website. And what we realized was there were so many restaurants that when they were coming to us, they would have one and it wouldn't integrate. It was coming through fax or email. And then when we went to the company to try to do an integration, they didn't really have an API. It wasn't really well documented. So we wanted a solution that we could provide to restaurants. And we're actually giving that to restaurants right now free of charge because of COVID. We just want to help as many restaurants as we can. And they actually get 100% of the revenue. There's no commissions or fees to the restaurant. So it's a phenomenal product, and you have to do that, right? Whether it's us, I actually used to work at Chow Now. They have a phenomenal product as well. And there's some other companies out there that are doing great things. But I think when it comes to first party ordering, you have to have a system that allows you to manage it, make menu changes quickly, offer LTOs, right? Allow for promos, but more importantly, allows for pictures, right? Like everyone has to understand now that this is a digital business and people eat with their eyes. Yeah. And so if you have something on there, they might not even read the whole description, right? They might go into the description because they see the food and they like it and they might be allergic to something. So now they want to say what they don't want in the food. So I think it's really important to have that. Now, that's one side of it. The other side of it is the data, right? Which we touched on a little bit earlier. The reason these third-party delivery services even exist today is because restaurants don't like change, right? And if all the restaurants just bought online ordering solutions, we wouldn't have third-party delivery. But what happened was, I love the story of Eat24, right? It was 4 people that were in an office in Daly City, and they were developers, and they got sick and tired of ordering the same food every night at 4 a.m., 2 a.m. From the same suspects, right? So they went to a couple of restaurants that they knew were open at the time, but didn't do, takeout or delivery. And they said, look, can we put your menu online? We want to order from you guys more often. And now it's, it was a huge company, got bought by Yelp, and then Yelp sold it to Grubhub. And it's just a great story about a necessity, right? And so that's why all the third-party companies exist today, right? Is because the restaurants didn't have takeout and delivery. They didn't have an easy way to order it online. So these third parties exist now because of it. But however, the one thing that everyone has to remember is that autonomous driving is coming, okay? Mm-hmm. It's not like it's a pipe dream. It's happening. I mean, we can take, with what Elon Musk is doing, and putting, spaceships up and landing them on an X, right? Like this is something that isn't far away, right? They're already doing autonomous driving with Postmates and Ford, where the car drives to the restaurant. They put a 4-number code into the PIN. The door opens. It's a hot box. They put it in. The car can actually go to multiple restaurants because that box is now locked and heated. And then they go and drop it off. The customer gets a 4-number code. They put that in. They grab their food, right? It's happening today. Now, a driver is in that car because of legal restrictions, but eventually there will be no driver in that car and it will be driving. Now, when that happens, the interesting model that is being discussed right now is that you actually won't have to purchase that car. You're actually going to be able to rent it per trip, per day, per week, per month for your restaurant, okay? Because it'll already be in there with a hot box and all that fun stuff. So how are you going to use that in 3 years or 5 years or 2 years, right? You have to own the customer data. You have to have a direct first-party ordering coming through your own website and using the third parties as a customer acquisition tool, right? And, it's very strict with how you can use that data. The third-party companies do a great job of protecting that data because it's so valuable. So what should that tell every restaurateur? They need to own their own customer data when possible. If the third-party delivery services that have billion-dollar valuations and are public companies, see it as valuable, that should teach you that you need to own that data yourself. So it's very important, like I said earlier, to come up with a strategy where you're tiering this, right? Where you have a website that's optimized, where your Google listing is set up in a way so it's driving traffic to your website. And then you have a way to do online ordering through your website, and then using those third parties to drive that incremental revenue through customer acquisition.
It's so fascinating. You're right. And I think, like you talk about autonomous driving, we think about it so far in the future, but it's really, the future is kind of now, right? And it's starting to happen. And, I think if anything that it's taught us in, the restaurant tech space is that it's ever changing and dynamic. And so, want to just kind of end this on more of less about third-party consolidation, but just really talking about, based on your experience of restaurant tech as a whole, and kind of where the industry was, the catalysts have changed and where you're seeing it's, where it's happening. Because I'm seeing some great things happening within the industry, and it's exciting for everybody, but would love to get what your perspective is.
So I think this is the first time where restaurant innovation, for the first time, is really taking hold. We haven't seen a huge increase in restaurant technology like this before. It's third party, you could argue, is the biggest disruption to the restaurants since drive-through, right? You're seeing the new construction of restaurants where they actually have 3 lanes going, right? Like Chick-fil-A perfected that. But the third lane is now all the third-party delivery drivers, because there's no reason for them to wait in line when the food's already been called in and they can just grab it and go very quickly. It's already prepaid, right? So you're seeing the design of that, and autonomous driving is coming into that as well, where the parking lots are a lot bigger because they want cars to be able to pull up so that they can actually park and be designated for that, so that the people can put in the food. So I think innovation in a big way is coming to the restaurant space. Now, with that being said, I think that when tech, which I grew up in the Silicon Valley, I've been around it my entire life, starting my own company has always been my dream. So I'm living my dream right now. So I'm very fortunate for that, right? But I think when technology comes in, you got to remember that a lot of these companies are still not profitable, okay? And they're backed by huge VCs that are driving the valuations of the company. And so when you can spend $30, $50, $100 on a customer acquisition, it's very easy to scale very quickly. And so I think restaurateurs just have to be a little bit protective of, these restaurants have been around for 25, 30 years. So just make sure that you're building or using a technology that has been tested. And if you're going to roll it out to 1 or 2 locations, right? Like, don't just do a mass rollout. Make sure everything works. I know it looks great on the outside, but make sure that you're really testing and understanding how this technology is going to affect the restaurant. Now, with that being said, ghost kitchens and virtual kitchens, I feel like we have to bring it up in this part of the conversation. The unit economics on it makes sense. The issue becomes is how they're going to be dealing with the fees that are being paid to the third parties. Is it a brand that you own? Is it a brand that you're franchising? Is it a franchisor's brand? Is it a whole nother restaurant concepts brand, and you're just being the fulfillment center? Because that's really what the underlying conversation is that these ghost kitchens and virtual kitchens are really turning into fulfillment centers, if you think of it like that, right? And so once again, we have to have the Amazon conversation, right? Like, why did Amazon be able to beat everyone else? Well, their fulfillment was phenomenal. They can do next day delivery. They can do same day delivery now. So I think when it comes to the ghost and virtual concepts, what I would do is I'd really take a close look at your menu. Is there a way for you to create another menu where you don't have to increase food costs, you don't have to buy anything else, you're really trying to manage waste in the restaurant and be responsible about it, right? We have a client that, they reached out to the third parties and said, hey, what can I do in my area that isn't, there's a high demand for it, but there's not a lot of restaurants doing it. And believe it or not, it was fried chicken, right? He has the chicken already. He actually ended up doing bone-in as well, which he had the fillets before. but to try it and roll it out, right? And see if there's some demand for it. He already had the fryer, so you didn't have to buy any more equipment. I think that's the perfect way to roll out the virtual concepts. Now, with that being said, from a technology standpoint, you have to now add that menu into the POS system. You have to redo all the menu mapping. You have to create it as a second restaurant so you make sure you understand where the revenue is coming from. And on the tablet side, if you don't have POS integration, we have to now integrate it into the tablet, get all the third parties. So it's almost like setting up a whole nother restaurant. So I think, if you take into effect that you're being smart about the menus, you're being smart about your food costs, you're developing a brand and letting people know that it's part of your brand, I think that there's success there. But I still think that everyone's trying to run right now, and this is a marathon. This isn't a sprint.
Yeah.
And in the restaurant technology space, you just have to make sure that what you're doing is going to benefit you long term, and that it's part of your overall strategy. If you're really looking at a long-term plan, you got to look at, what's the POS system, because that's really where you're at, right? And you don't have to replace it tomorrow, right? But if you're on a legacy system that isn't cloud-based and doesn't have open APIs, it's going to be really difficult, and you're going to be putting Band-Aids on everything all day long. So you really have to understand, is that something we're purchasing in 2 years or 3 years? And if it is, understand what systems are out there so that they have those integrations, so that when you're working with those companies, you can integrate in the future, and that they already have restaurants live with it. Because everyone's going to say it's on their roadmap, right? I mean, our roadmap's 200 pages long.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. We've all heard that roadmap story. Or yes, we can do it.
Yeah, and then the company gets acquired, right? And then now it's part of a POS company, and they get rid of all the other POSs, and they just want you to build exclusively for them, and they own the company now, so that's what you do. So I think, like I said, it's really understanding what that strategy is long term, what POS system you're going to be using, how the online ordering is going to function. Make sure you have a website. Is there a loyalty component in that? Is there a gift card component with that? One of the big things right now is people can't use their gift cards in the restaurant. So with online ordering, that's one of the things in Pronto that we're adding right now is, how do we accept gift cards online? So these people that have purchased them can use them, right? And so it's just making sure that all the different technologies work. And it's an exciting time to be in the restaurant space because, just 4 years ago at our restaurant, when I was starting this company, we used a cash register, Casio cash register, and we had a fax machine. And that was just 4 years ago. So to think of where that is with that restaurant now having a Toast POS system, everything's integrated through the POS system for third-party delivery is phenomenal. Think we can go that far from 0 to 100 in 4 years. So like I said, very exciting time to be a restaurateur right now.
I think that's all great, Chris, and great advice, and appreciate that. I think the one thing I would add, especially on the POS topic is, you will, in the end of the day, you will spend more money trying to Band-Aid together. And so I think anything that's coming out of this is, that's an investment that people really have to start thinking about, because your TCO is going to, you're going to see the payback by putting in a POS that does some of these seamless integrations, and that you can extract the data out of to really help give you insights to manage the business. But I'm very hopeful and excited about where restaurant tech is heading. Really appreciate your time. If people want to get in touch with you and YourFare, what's the best way to engage?
Yeah, our website is yourfareinc.com. My email is chris@yourfareinc.com. And they can shoot me a quick email, and more than happy to have that conversation. I think it's funny because I still do a lot of the demos for our company. So, you get to the end of the demo and you tell someone that you started the company, and they're like, I'm talking to the guy that started. I was not expecting that. So, we still try to keep it small, team of 25. And, whenever you call into our support, you're going to get someone on the phone that's here based in Austin. So we love keeping that going, and we're here to support any small to medium-sized restaurants. Love helping the mom and pops.
Awesome. I love the passion. Thank you again, Chris. I really appreciate your time.
Yep. Thank you so much.